Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 139 of the Heroic Investing Show, a podcast for first responders, members of the military, veterans, and anyone looking to improve their financial future and gain some freedom with their time. We teach America's heroes how to build passive income, build their startup business, and safely grow wealth through real estate and other alternative investments. We help current and prior first responders put protections and systems in place to enable them to build a life where they can focus on their passion, the service or product that they are uniquely gifted to share with the world and gain compensation from. My name is Gary Pinkerton, and I co-host this show that hopefully you find helpful and inspiring with Jason Hartman. And today is one of Jason's episodes. So the one I picked for today, or that Jason is going to be running today, is an interview that he did on the Creating Wealth show with a mentor of mine, Pat Donohoe. So these two guys, Jason Hartman, Pat Donohoe, I'm blessed to have been able to put those two guys together a couple of years ago. And really, it was a bit self-serving because I drew together two mentors that I truly believe in. Patrick is a gentleman that I met back in 2011, even before I met Jason. And as I was just starting to look into improving my family's finances and starting to look into real estate investing as an opportunity or an option for some cash flow, right? Getting passive income that enables me, the freedom gives me the opportunity to be able to step away from an earned income salary position if I want to, run my own companies, start my own businesses, and help others do the same. One of the reasons I'm running this one is because Patrick just came out with a new book, which I think this audience would greatly benefit from reading. And you have the opportunity to get a free copy of that book if you just reach out to me at gary@garypinkerton.com. That's just my name, so gary@garypinkerton.com. And I'll send you a copy of the book. It's an e-version or an ebook copy. You can certainly go to Amazon and get his book there, either in paperback or hardback version if you'd rather that method. And his book is titled Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. So it's an interesting title. It's somewhat catchy to kind of get your attention. But the point is that those with financial knowledge, those that understand how to protect their money, how to maintain control of their assets, and how to focus spending their money on things that have the highest probability of providing them success, are those that continually, generation after generation, make out. And, Robert Kiyosaki talks about a coin where there's one side, and then there's the opposite side. So there's heads and there's tails. And then there's the third side, which is the edge. And understanding the argument between heads or tails when it's buy or sell an asset, by standing on the edge, understanding both points of view, and then making your decision based on the situation, based on the current mechanics of things, makes it such that, or economics of things, makes it such that you have the ability to understand the full picture and make a decision, a fully informed decision. And that's what the truly wealthy, the truly professional do. And that's what Patrick talks about in his book. And so that kind of led to the part of the title as well. I had the extreme pleasure of being able to help him contribute to that book and edit the book. I've read it many, many times, and it's having a substantial effect on people who have read it. So I really I urge you to go read that book. In there in chapter 7, he talks about something that he coins the saving and investing pyramid. And it's the concept or the idea of building a pyramid where, of course, you're going to lay the bricks in the foundation, build a nice solid foundation, and then step up from that to the next tier. And he talks about like 4 tiers. And the bottom tier is really what we do at Paradigm Life. It's protections and it's savings, stuff that has to remain liquid. So your emergency savings, your business savings, your reserves for your businesses and for your properties if you have rental properties. And then when you move beyond that, it's about direct investing. It's investing in things that you directly control. You get to decide when to buy and sell, when to devote a dollar to each one of these things. And because you have that control, as a result, you have less risk, right? Because you have the ability to understand everything that's happening and control the outcome. And the number one thing to focus on in any situation when you have a dollar is your highest performing asset. And he makes a very strong argument in this book that everyone's highest performing asset, their best asset, that has the highest potential is themselves. So investing in yourself is really the first thing that you want to do once you're in a position where you're not going to fall off the pyramid, which in my opinion is living underneath an overpass and holding up cardboard signs. And that happens when you've messed up the first level of the pyramid. So many people out there, because this is what their HR department at work talks about, put all of their money into 401ks and yet have thousands of dollars in student loan and credit card debts that are eating them alive with interest payments. And it's because they haven't built the bottom level of the pyramid. And so I believe Patrick's book is one of the most important things you can do for your family's financial future. And I really push you to get out there and read that book. And I'm offering you a copy of it. If you don't already have one or don't have a source for one, please just go to Gary@GaryPinkerton.com. And so in this interview, Jason and Patrick talk about Meet the Masters this January and all of the changes that were happening at the time. They kind of start off talking about President Trump, our first real estate president, and the tax law changes that are coming, how there's a lot of differing opinions, but they make a prediction that, in my opinion, has really come to fruition. And that was that, Jason makes a comment that people will be more optimistic when they have more money in their pockets. So, he's commenting, I think that was Jason. I don't know if I said Jason or Patrick there, but it was Jason. And, he's saying that these predictions are going to come true, that America is going to get stimulated. Our economy is going to start to turn north. And when people's paychecks and their quality of life, their standard of living goes up, they're going to be a little more optimistic. And I think we're seeing that come to fruition. There's a lot of people who still, believe that he could be a little more refined. He could be a little less awkward in social and international political situations. But it's becoming more and more hard to deny the fact that some of the business decisions he's making are starting to turn out to help our economy, no doubt. Another great one from Patrick is that the nature of the uneducated investor is to buy high and sell low. And there's an annual report that goes out that you can purchase called the Dalbar Study. And they look at, how the S&P 500, how all of the markets have done over time and how the individual investor, the average investor, has fared. And they do substantially worse than the indices themselves would predict that individuals would do. And it's because of this kind of buyer's mentality, or this investor mentality. So I think there's a lot of nuggets in this about free enterprise, entrepreneurship, prospering, having control, liquidity, and use of your money. And the other things that I've talked about setting up your personal financial picture so that you can take the steps to perhaps walking away from a W-2 job, if that's your goal. Starting your own business, again, if that's your goal. In the end, it all comes down to income, right? What we really want, and most real estate investors understand this. They understand that the road to wealth is paved with passive income sources. And as you transition into retirement, the only real change there that happens is that you have a feeling that income source, the adequate income that you're going to need if you live to 90 or 150, is that the income is relatively guaranteed, if not 100% guaranteed. If you have that, if you have guaranteed income, in my opinion, your net worth does not matter. If you have $100 million and you don't have any guarantees that will stick around to provide an income source for you, it's useless. While an individual that has no money in their bank accounts but has a pension from, let's say, the federal government that is likely to continue throughout their life, then that person's completely secure. So it's about income, right? So it's about income when we're younger, still of working years, and want to have the ability to transition to some new job, to travel the world, to spend time with our kids or our grandkids, take time off work. All of those things simply just require the confidence that we have income to replace that W-2 trading time for dollars income that we're currently doing. So it all comes down to income. And certainly in retirement, when you have an inability to work or certainly no desire to continue with manual labor, having a guaranteed income is really where it is, right? So it's not about net worth. It's not about everything that you hear on television about pass your money to Wall Street and they have your solution. They may have your solution for accumulation, for growing wealth, but they don't have a solution for distributing it safely throughout your retirement years. And so I think Patrick and I think his book and I think questioning the status quo are really, really important. So this one might be a little bit off of real estate, although Jason and Patrick get into real estate quite a bit. I invite you to think about this message, consider getting Patrick's book, read the thing. I think you and your family will appreciate it for years to come. Thanks so much, and I look forward to our off-topic episode coming up here on 140, our next show. Thanks so much, and we'll talk next time. Here are Patrick and Jason Hartman.
This is your host, Jason Hartman, and welcome listeners in 164 countries worldwide. My guest today, who will be with me through the entire show, is Pat Donohoe. He is the CEO of Paradigm Life, and he has some pretty interesting, unique tools that help real estate investors, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I just wanted to get a little debrief because he was one of our distinguished speakers at Meet the Masters of Income Property 2017. So I wanted to quickly debrief on that, also talk about the new administration and this massive tidal wave, tsunami, sea change that is coming at all of us, which I think is a very good one. I think we're in for, happy days are here again. I don't know, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but Pat, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, Jason. I'm great. Yeah, it's that happy days. I mean, not many people are happy, but there are certain people that are.
There are some disgruntled people, but when they see their paychecks increase, I think they're going to get a lot happier. They're probably not going to give the evil Donald Trump any credit for it because they hate him, but it's going to happen. You know, the rising tide floats all ships, and lower wage and middle wage people are going to benefit from this massive economic stimulus, which I believe is underway. He's only been in office a day. So,
well, he was doing a lot even before he went into office, and look at all the momentum that he created there. So it's been impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Well, we're going to talk about that. And by the way, you are coming to us from beautiful Salt Lake City today. I was actually out there last week visiting you and talking about some business things and so forth. And I wanted to just get your take on Meet the Masters of Income Property. We had that. I just got back last night from Irvine, California. You spoke there along with G. Edward Griffin, who's the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, very famous author, and he was awesome. And Garrett Sutton, the author of many best-selling books in the Rich Dad series and outside of the Rich Dad series with Robert Kiyosaki. We also had Darren Blomquist with Realty Track and Adam Data Solutions talk about what to expect in the real estate market, and a lot of wonky economist type stuff, charts and graphs, and we're giving those his charts and graphs, his slide deck to all of our attendees for Meet the Masters. I think we probably had about 140 people there. And, Pat, what do you think of the event?
Well, I mean, it was the first time I had been to a Meet the Masters event, and I've gone to lots of different conferences. But I was impressed, Jason. You did a great job, and I think it was really interesting to see just the diversity of topics and speakers. And that's, with me and kind of how I look at whether it's my investment or my business or the economy, I'm big on being prepared and looking at what you presented, or at least your speakers presented, or was, from a data standpoint, what the economy is doing from that kind of objective measurement with the realty track guy, but also multiple markets and how they address certain things going on in their specific market. It was intriguing. It helped kind of confirm a few things for me as far as what I think is going on in the economy. But at the same time, it also brought up some other questions that I had. But the people there, the caliber of people was incredible. I had some fascinating conversations just in investing, but also with, from an economic and philosophic standpoint, because G. Edward Griffin was there, some great conversations as well. So I think that's, the 50% of the benefit is really the people you get to meet and network with and get to know. So I had a great time.
Yeah, there's so much exchange of ideas that happen, and this was the first time we did breakout sessions, so I got some really good feedback about that, even though it was raining and pouring and storming in Southern California, that's for sure. Who says it never rains in California? I don't know.
Yeah, I went from 18 inches of snow to 18 inches of rain, it seemed like.
It must be all that global warming, I guess.
I
It's
guess.
always the reason the weather's changing, but, whatever. It was freezing, and that's due to global warming, I guess. That's the logic. You can make any new logic nowadays. You can make anything up and make anything try to make sense. It's crazy. So, Pat, Trump has been in office for 1 day. Literally, yesterday was his first day, his first work day, and already there are like Foxconn. I couldn't believe what I read. Foxconn is the Chinese manufacturer that creates all these Apple products in China, and they're giant, by the way. And they now said that they are considering a $7 billion with a B, $7 billion factory in the U.S. that would create 50,000 jobs. I don't think that would have ever happened under probably any other president, even Reagan, who was considered to be very business friendly. And, basically it works like this. If the companies want to bring their goods into the U.S. and access the largest consumer market and the largest economy the human race has ever known, the U.S. economy, about $18 trillion economy, 72% of which is consumption. So it's not just the size of our economy, but it's the massive consumption of, the Americans are consumers, okay, like no other, right? And, we can argue whether that's good or bad, but it is the way it is. And, and so, the toll you have to pay to access it is a tariff. And, philosophically, I don't really, I love free market stuff, but just from a practical purpose, when you have the playing field so unlevel, with Chinese workers making nothing compared to American workers, but, then again, that affects American workers because it pulls down their wages, creates unemployment here or underemployment, and, the discouraged workers, which aren't even counted in the unemployment rolls. So people, this is, got to peel several layers back of this onion. But Pat, it's a better deal now, the way Foxconn looks at it and so many of these other companies, to just set up a factory in the U.S. so they don't have to pay a tariff, right? And so that'll bring, 50,000 jobs in one swoop. There have been many other deals that Trump made before he even was president. And like you said, he set this whole backdrop, this whole context for this. What do you think? What can we expect?
Well, I try not to speculate a lot, and that's why last year I started to go through a lot of his books and get an idea of how he did business, because I just came to the conclusion that the way in which he would run a country would be similar to his philosophy of business. And I think he, so far, and it hasn't been too much time, he stayed true to that. And his passion is getting deals, and he made that very clear in his campaign. And looking at what he's doing right now, I think he is, he's making the wager to the rest of the world, which is, and he said this in his inauguration speech, America is first. And so if there are deals out there that is weighted more toward the trading partner, rather than America, he's going to change that. And so if that's, the reason Foxconn decided to make that announcement, but I mean, you look at like the, reinstituting some of the negotiations with NAFTA, reinstituting that, and also, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, those were his first orders of business, which sends a signal to all the trading partners, which is, you guys better, do deals with us. You better do what we say, or else you're going to lose. And I think people I think trading partners are thinking, they know he's serious. And so it's gonna be interesting. And I would say, once you give me some feedback there, I would say that there's always going to be unintended consequences to that, because you are, removing production and price structure through, how a product is created from a country where it's cheaper, in all things being considered, cheaper than the U.S. Really the tariffs and the taxes they're going to have to pay, and whatever deal that is negotiated, if it doesn't come out to a net cost of the same, it may adjust prices on the upward, so that even though people have more money in their pocket, they may be paying higher prices. I mean, that's the rhetoric that I've heard. So it's going to be interesting to see how the deals actually play out and what the consideration is given, from the United States to this trading partner.
And this may sound like, Trump is being a tough guy jerk, right? But that's only because when you compare it to the terrible deal that prior administrations, especially Bill Clinton, but every one of them have sold out the American worker. Okay, it's not just Clinton. I mean, this goes way back, okay, and everything in between. But Clinton was one of the biggest offenders, I believe. They just sold out the American worker. And so now to get things back to like equilibrium, that's all that he's doing, is getting a reasonable deal back and not incentivizing these companies to leave American soil. I mean, it's just been terrible. They take all these jobs with them. They have no loyalty. It's kind of like in sports, how they, in the old days of sports, and I don't know much about sports because I have way too much to do than watch, sports games on TV. But, in the old days, you used to have the home team, right? And the home team was a pretty, solid home team. And you knew who the players were year after year, and they'd change out a little bit. But then when you had free agency begin, there was no such thing as a home team anymore, right? Because all those players moved around all the time, and they just became, you could call them capitalists or you could call them prostitutes, whatever, right? They just became looking for the best deal, right? And they had no allegiance to the hometown anymore or the home team. And that's what's happened with these big multinational corporations. They have no allegiance to the people that made them successful. All these companies, they got successful selling to the American consumer, but they don't feel any need to give back and create jobs for American consumers, right?
Well, I think you look at, whether it's the Clintons or with President Obama, former President Obama, I guess I should say now, but I think if you look at him, his, the narrative was he was the world leader. He wasn't just the U.S. leader. I think he looked at himself as a thought leader for the world. But at the same time, that is not really how I think those healthy relationships are created, because the cultures around the world are much different than the culture of the United States. So I think as he would try to pander to people, or he would try to be nice or make friends in a certain sense, right? He gave up a lot, and he gave lots of. I mean, we're still giving a lot of money to the outside world as this kind of sign of charity. And I think they, whether it's the Clintons or whether it's him, it's this. Well, we need to give. We are so prosperous and we have abundance and we need to give to other people, but that it never works. And typically we get the raw end of the deal when it comes to it. And so that's where I think with Trump, he's a businessman. He's not emotional. He's not trying to be a world leader. And I think, when he was preaching on the campaign trail, he wasn't just preaching to the American public, he was sending a signal to the rest of the world. And like I said, I mean, that's just how I look at it from an information standpoint, looking at what the result is going to be because of some of his initiatives. That is where I'm just curious, because really those big changes where you're removing jobs from other countries, you're removing their ability to produce, what is it going to do there? Plus, we have big trade balances or trade deficits with China and with Mexico, which with Mexico will probably reduce once he renegotiates NAFTA. But looking at the holders of treasuries, if we start to mess with China, they could just keep selling treasuries, and who knows what that's going to do to the bond to the bond market. So there's all these derivatives of the actual initiative, and I'm just curious to see how that's going to affect things.
It's all very, very complicated for sure. This is not simple stuff by any means, and it even gets, trade is complicated enough, but you want to start talking about foreign policy in terms of, war and peace, and that gets insanely complicated. But, just to comment on your point, Pat, about giving to other countries, a lot of it becomes like, you support someone and then they become your enemy later. This was true with Osama bin Laden. It was true with Saddam Hussein. And it just always seems to happen. All you need to do is wait 15 or 20 years, and then that same group that you supported becomes your enemy because they've got your technology, your arms, your money, and it's just ridiculous. But speaking of giving, and most people probably are going to totally miss this one, but Obama quietly sent $221 million to the Palestinian Authority just hours before leaving office. That was a business.
That was the day of leaving office. Yeah, I saw that.
That was a Business Insider article, and believe me, Business Insider likes Obama and hates Trump, at least the way I read it, because they are extremely critical of Trump. And I didn't think they were very critical of Obama at all. So they're, seemingly very left-leaning. But yeah, they sent, you could call the Palestinian Authority a terrorist organization, one man, but then again, you can say one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and I totally get that. This is very complicated stuff, but it's just important that people know Obama sent $250 million to the Palestinian Authority just a couple hours before he, walked out of the White House. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a very, if you look just at the spectrum of how, the presidencies have been running the country, it's going to be completely opposite. And from a Trump standpoint, I think that if, people read his books, specifically The Art of the Deal, they'll see, the evidence is all there as to why he says what he says, why he's doing what he's doing, and really, the intention behind all of his actions. And that's why, I think that from a business standpoint, he's making the right call. But, from my perspective, if this was a clean slate, a blank canvas, it's one thing. But, he's now dealing with 8 years, 2 terms of policies that he really didn't support any of. He didn't support any of those policies. So now he's, you have unwinding, it's going to be fascinating to see how he deals with it, because he understands business, he understands getting the right people around him. And I think he's doing that. Now it's, now it's looking at the result. What's the result going to be of what he's instituting? It's going to be a fascinating couple of years.
It's hard for me to say I really support Trump in a lot of ways, but in some ways I do. But, he is such an oddball. He is such a wild card in terms of our history that we really have to just wait the first 100 days, right, to see what happens, because this is going to be unlike any other presidency. Let's just hope we get to the chance to see those first 100 days, because, Madonna says she wants to blow up the White House. Now, I hope the Secret Service arrests her for that, because, that's illegal to threaten the president's life. But these are the tolerant people, right?
Well, it's interesting, Jason. And so last night when I went home, I have a 12-year-old, Hannah, but my 12-year-old daughter, she starts, we have a very, a very detailed conversation about Trump. And, Hannah, she goes to a public school, but a lot of what the teachers are saying, a lot of what the parents are saying is very anti-Trump. And so we just had and I've had this on a lot of topics with her, but we had a frank conversation about why people feel that way about him. Now, there's things I like about Trump. There's things I don't. I didn't vote for him. So I look at, what I talked to her about, and it was more of how do you analyze a situation? How do you analyze a person? And really, everything was about just these kind of misnomers and these kind of false things that people look at Trump and come to a conclusion about, and then emotionally react. And now you have these insane protests and marches and gatherings where they don't really know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Does that make sense? I mean, I love to see your take on that, because there's just been this overwhelming animosity toward him.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, two of my friends I had a few friends at the inauguration and also at the march in Washington, and two of my friends sent me videos where they walked up to people, just turned on their camera in their smartphone, walked up to people and videotaped asking them why they were there. And one guy, just by asking the question, he got this very hostile, threatening response, like the crowd was going to just kill him. I mean, it was unbelievable to see that. And then the other one, a couple of the people he went up to, they didn't know. They just said they wanted to be part of something, basically. That was like the overriding theme of these people. They really just, they were there for women's rights, but they didn't know which rights or what Trump was doing to hurt women. Or they couldn't explain it at all. It was shocking. Now, listen, in all fairness, some people did know why they were there, and they had a reason to be there, and whatever the reason was, they knew it. But a lot of people are just like these lost souls looking for a cause.
Great point.
It's crazy. It really is. Well, Pat, just sum it all up and let's move on. Sum it all up with what do you think is going to happen with the economy, the real estate market? Any thoughts?
Well, the crystal ball in front of me, I'm just kidding. I don't have a crystal ball, but I look at, my thing is I look at him from a business standpoint, and I know exactly what he's trying to do. And really, I would say it's for a business person, the options are very limited. So what he's doing, I think, right now are the right things. I just think he's really creating some momentum up against a lot of resistance. And that resistance is, $20 trillion of deficit, even more of unfunded liabilities, plus, a half a $1 trillion of overspending per year. So you look at what he's going up against. That's what I'm curious to see as, is it going to make a difference where it's going to actually get us back on the right track? And there's just a lot of ground to make up. But I really do think that when people have more money in their pockets, they think differently. They're more optimistic. They're more positive. And so hopefully, that helps from a consumer sentiment standpoint. But really looking at how the other aspects of the economy are going to affect his initiatives, that's where it could go so many different directions. But remember, Jason, he did say in a few different audio blips during his campaign that he was open to not bankrupting or renegotiating debt or doing something like that, which I think that's interesting. And I don't think Trump says things without, really understanding the intention behind it. So I think he has been thinking about what to do with the debt. So I'm very curious to see how he deals with that when that comes due. So it's going to be. Wouldn't
that be great if the country could just declare bankruptcy and have a whole reset and start over?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, I would say, is there another way? I mean, you can print ourselves to oblivion and keep using the Federal Reserve and that monetary policy to do it. But the other is just renegotiate and default, right? Which they're going to call something different. But when that happens, I mean, that's going to be an interesting series of events. But anyway, that's kind of what I think is. I think he's on the right track. I think it's going to be, a good kind of stimulus or injection of adrenaline in the beginning, and hopefully that carries through.
Yeah, we shall see. We shall see. It's going to be really fascinating to watch this. Well, Pat, tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and especially how it could be used for real estate investing. I'm a client of yours, Gary Pinkerton, who's in our Venture Alliance, and you also joined our Venture Alliance mastermind group recently. It's been really enlightening to learn from both of you about some really creative techniques that you can use to increase your financial wealth, protect assets, and also, especially use that in a real estate investor context.
Well, so looking at what Paradigm Life does, I mean, we are, we have about 45 employees, 30 advisors, and we do just financial consultations. And so we're insurance-based financial advisors, but looking at really one aspect of the business, it is working with real estate investors and business owners. Now, we're different because we use insurance products. We don't use Wall Street-based products for financial planning, savings, preparing for retirement, et cetera. And the reason why it works so well with real estate is because you're not choosing between doing our program and strategy and investing in real estate. So looking at what initially attracted me to the whole strategy in general was at the time I had property. I had a couple rental properties, and that's the direction I wanted to go as far as my finances were concerned. And I met a woman who her name's Kim Butler, and she was one of the original Rich Dad advisors, and she taught me her strategy. She taught me how it worked and why it's different than the mainstream. And so today, we just teach individuals how to use these products to improve their family, to improve their business, and really just replace what they were using a 401k or an IRA or some sort of Wall Street-based product or strategy to accomplish. But then for the business owner and the real estate investor, really how it works is similar to how most executive retirement packages work. And that's what's fascinating, is that you have these huge corporations, huge bank executives that you would think are set up for retirement through a 401k and market-based investing, but they're not. Most of their retirement packages are all set up through the exact products that we use, but yet they're paid for by essentially their employees and Wall Street kind of creating this this idea of raising capital through stock and offerings, and then mutual funds, and then packaging those mutual funds around a 401k and IRA. I mean, you have this whole kind of charade that helps fund these very rich, luxurious benefit packages of executives. So the more I've read and learned about that, the more we've incorporated those aspects into our strategy, so that the mainstream person that is maybe low six-figure income can take advantage of some of the same benefits, which in my opinion are on par with any type of projection that a traditional financial planner gives you. But in the end, I mean, I've owned several of your properties, and I have a number of others. My whole financial plan for me personally and for my family is all business, our insurance products, and real estate investments. So essentially, we're just doing what I do and what I learned, from proven track records of the past. And today it's working out really, really well. But at the same time, the market hitting all-time highs doesn't help us, because it creates that euphoria, that feeling of euphoria on investors. But looking at kind of the past and the history of market cycles, it's once we do correct again, that's when people will see especially our clients will see the tremendous value that it has.
Well, that's the problem with the market hitting all-time highs. Most people that are bummed out about that, it's already happened, and a lot of that's priced into the market, and now you're at a more dangerous point with more risk and more volatility, when that happens. So, it's that double-edged sword. But when you mention that it doesn't help you, it's because that's, money flows in there, because it's like the drunk guy who can't get enough, or the gambler who can't get enough, right? That they just look at this speculative. It'll go on forever. You know, I remember that it was like the famous story about John D. Rockefeller right before the Great Depression. He knew the market was overvalued when his shoeshine boy was giving him stock tips, or something like that. I don't know. I may have slightly mangled that story, but.
Well, it's how people view the world. I mean, you have those that view the world from a rational standpoint and then from an emotional standpoint. And I think, looking at when it comes to money, it's very short term. And when it's growing and gaining, that right there is it's a very short-lived part of a market cycle. That's typically what people focus on. And so once it corrects, that's when, usually people will step back and start to rationally analyze what they're doing and why they're doing it and what happened. So right now it's like people are in that kind of buzz of earning really good returns and the market is at highs, their balances are growing. And that right there is, most people do not make significant changes at that level. The changes are typically made at the bottom. And that's why it's buy low, sell high, but everybody buys high and sells low. And that's just the nature of the, uneducated emotional investor.
That is the way it always seems to work for the small investor. The institutionals, the institutional investors don't necessarily have that because to some extent they control the markets, right? But they also have just better research and, theoretically a less emotional angle on investing. So yeah, most people get in at that really frothy stage when they've heard lots of stories for the past few years about people making fortunes. And then, the market corrects and they lose. And then they hold on down as that slope goes down. I almost wish I could really show a graph to explain this, but a lot of our listeners have seen it. And as that slope goes down, then they keep holding on, and they think, oh, it'll change, it'll come back. And then they finally sell at a low point in the trough because they just can't hold on any longer, and they need access to whatever capital's left over. And the nice thing about income property is that because it's multidimensional, you can keep adjusting your strategy. That's one of the things we talked about over the weekend. But can you share, just as we wrap it up here, any quick example that you want to give before you go on how this works, maybe a little more mechanically?
Sure. Yeah, and obviously visuals always help here, but I think you said you were going to put some links in the in the show notes, because we have a lot of our education is free. It's online. You can learn about it without really any obligation. But from a mechanical standpoint, I'll look at it from a real estate perspective. So I'll just use me as an example. So each year I have 20 policies just because of how you fund them and some of the IRS restrictions, because there's a tax benefit to having them. But as I do that every single year, it typically is a function of my income, so a percentage of my income. And then I, reserve a certain amount for, rainy day, for overhead for the business. And then the differential between what I have and that reserve amount, that goes into kind of my opportunity fund. And I hold them all inside of the equity of these insurance policies. So inside the insurance policies, the money is private. It grows tax free. It's not correlated to the market. And then looking at the biggest benefit, in my opinion, is the fact that the insurance company gives you a line of credit against it. So what I do is I essentially, look for opportunities, and I've participated in a lot of syndications recently. I purchased some of your properties. So how that goes down is I'll basically take a loan from one of these policies or across a couple of the policies, and I'll go and acquire a piece of real estate or put money into an investment. And then as those investments pay out, as opposed to depositing that money in a bank account, I'll take it and then I'll pay back the loan that I took out against it. So it helps kind of with the expenses associated with the return, so it helps from a tax standpoint, but also the entire balance of whatever I put into this piece of property through that loan. That whole balance is still in my that equity or cash, and earning a tax-free return. So essentially my money is able to do two jobs at the same time. But in the mechanics of it all, what helps me is it keeps me disciplined. Okay, it keeps me disciplined to keep putting money aside every single year, and it also keeps me disciplined to make sure that I make the right investment. I do the proper due diligence, because if I take a loan to acquire this investment or acquire this property, okay, that loan, even if the property or the investment goes defunct, I'm still on the hook to pay back this loan. So it helps me really assess the property differently. And then when I do receive any type of return, as opposed to, buying going on vacation or buying a car or, doing something consumptive, which I'm not saying is bad, but as it pertains to the actual investment, it keeps me disciplined to take those returns and pay down this line of credit, which I can then take out again and use to acquire other investments. But again, it gives me some order and structure as to how I manage my finances. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing you point out. At the very worst, and it's much better than this, but like at the very least, at the very worst case scenario, the one thing that is really great about income property as an investment, and as you were comparing it to yours, that's also true with yours. It's a forced savings program, because it's not really very easy to access the cash in your real estate, the equity in your real estate. I mean, you can certainly refinance. During the crazy boom time before there was a bust, they were giving out ATM cards based on home equity. And I thought, oh my God, we're definitely at a peak here, when that kind of stuff happens. And that product may, by the way, still be out there, but it's really just against a pre-established home equity line. But, and people don't think of it as available capital, really. A lot of people don't. So it's nice because it's sort of tucked away. And, that is a good, wholesome discipline at the very least. And, there's so many things that are so much better about it, but I just wanted to point that out. So I like that comparison. That's good.
Well, it helps. It's like it's the irrational barrier, right? So it's you have to actually do quite a bit and wait, which, that time helps you rationalize the decision. And typically, if you do have an immediacy of access, your irrational side of things could grab that without really thinking through it and make the wrong decision.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what happens to all the stock traders and the gamblers and all of that stuff. So good point. Pat, give out your website.
So our website's paradigmlife.net, paradigmlife.net. And on there we have, our learning portals, which are free to access. So they're pretty easy to find through the website.
And just to make it a little easier, I'll pronounce it. It's Paradigm. Paradigmlife.net. That's not a .com, that's a .net. So Pat, thank you for sharing the paradigm with us. And we'll have you back on the show as things evolve in the economy, and look forward to hearing more. And I guess I will see you in Las Vegas in March at our next Venture Alliance Mastermind meeting. Oh gosh, there's so much to do in Vegas. It's really hard. We always do a couple fun activities. And on this one, we are really struggling with, which one to pick. There's so much to do here. So I'll look forward to seeing you in March, okay?
No, same with me, Jason. Thanks for having me on. And I look forward to Venture Alliance in March.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.